Hello everyone, welcome back to Too Sweet MTG and welcome to another Commander deck check. In today's video, we're going to be looking at Galadriel, Light of Valinor.
It is 2 green, white and a blue for a 3/3 legendary creature, Elf Noble. It has, whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. You have add green, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, or scry 2 and then draw a card. Galadriel is a fantastic value engine. To fuel it, all you need is to run a bunch of cheap creatures and maybe some token makers, because if you have those, you'll easily be getting each of those 3 options every turn. So to fully get the most out of that ability, we're going to be building this as an Elf Matters deck with a Blink subtheme. Let's go over why we're doing that. Firstly, Galadriel herself is obviously an elf, but the reason we want to run more elves in the deck is because they are very good at putting multiple bodies onto the board in a single turn. Elves also work really well with all of the options of Galadriel. A lot of elves are very cheap and cost a green to cast. Galadriel makes us the mana to cast more elves in a turn. She also makes all of our elves bigger and scarier with the +1/+1 counters. And then she even digs us to more elves with the scry 2 and draw a card, which also synergizes really nicely with a lot of the elves from the Lord of the Rings set itself. Also, by having a bunch of elves in the deck, we can run super powerful Lord effects to really tie everything together. The Blink aspect of the deck will be because firstly, there's just a lot of good enter the battlefield effects that we're going to be running, so getting them multiple times will be great. But more importantly than that, is that if we don't have a creature to cast, we can flicker a creature already in play to have it trigger Galadriel so we can use one of those options. But then lastly, and possibly most cool of all, if we've used all of the options of Galadriel, we can blink her. This means that she'll reset, and will then mean any creature that comes into play after that this turn will trigger her all over again. So the game plan is pretty simple. Play a bunch of elves to ramp out Galadriel, use her abilities to build an even wider and chunkier board state, and swing through and win the game. A quick note on how this video will work. We'll be giving you all the different sections that you need to build the deck yourself. We'll then give you a ton of options for you to choose from so you can really make the deck your own. Any card we mentioned will be down in the description below. While you're there, give the video a like if you found it helpful. Our first section will be our Elf Matters cards. These are cards that either make us a bunch of elves or reward us for having an army of them in play. First up we have some cards that do it all, with Imperious Perfect and Galadhrim Brigade. They are both lords for our elven army that can also put a bunch more elves onto the battlefield. Imperious Perfect lets us put elves into play turn after turn, and then the squad ability of the Brigade means that we can make a bunch of lords all in one go. Next up we have some other great elf token makers, with cards like Rhys the Redeemed, Elvish Warmaster, Lys Alana Huntmaster and Wolverine Riders. These are all fantastic spells that make us a bunch of tokens turn after turn, all but guaranteeing that we'll trigger all of Galadriel's effects. Next up we have some spells that buff up all of our elves, with cards like Arwen Weaver of Hope and Master Biomancer. These are especially great in the deck, as they put +1/+1 counters onto our creatures when they come in, equal to either their toughness in the case of Arwen, or power in the case of Master Biomancer. These are the perfect cards to put Galadriel's +1/+1 counters onto, as effectively by putting them onto these cards, they will then put them on the rest of our board as they come into play. Then lastly in this section, we have another card that does a bit of everything, with Freyalise Llanowar's Fury. It can repeatedly make us a Llanowar elf every turn, or answers a key artifact or enchantment, or can fully stock our hand with a bunch of goodies. An absolutely fantastic card. Next up we have some Blink cards. These are here to either flicker some creatures with good enter the battlefield effects, or as we've said, to reset Galadriel so we can trigger her multiple times in a turn. First up we have some instant speed Blink effects. Great at giving us a bunch of additional value, and also serving as a great way of letting a key creature dodge some targeted removal. I personally like cards like Cloudshift, Ephemerate, Momentary Blink, Displace and Ghostly Flicker. I like effects like these specifically that bring the creature back straight away rather than at the end of turn. The reason for this is that these work much better with Galadriel. If we're bringing back the creature straight away, we'll have more time to cast more creatures after her to trigger her abilities all over again. With the Blink effects that come back at the end of turn, you don't get to double dip like this, as unless the creature has flash, you won't be able to cast it that turn. Next up we have some creatures that let us blink our spells, with cards like Gilraen, Dúnedain Protector, Emiel the Blessed, Restoration Angel and Yorion Sky Nomad. The fact that Gilraen and Emiel are also repeatable is going to be fantastic, just giving us value turn after turn. Next up we have some dedicated card draw, and like with most decks we want 8 to 10 bits here so that we see all the cards that we need to win the game. First up we have some effects that draw us cards when we play our elves, with things like Leaf Crowned Visionary, Beast Whisperer, Guardian Project and Kindred Discovery. They're all fantastic options, especially given just how many elves we'll have available to us. You then have Elvish Visionary and Llanowar Visionary, fantastic elves that draw us a card when they enter the battlefield. Just really solid as they replace themselves, but they get even better if we then blink them. We then have Rumour Gatherer, a great elf in white that'll fix the top card of our library and all but guarantee we draw an extra card a turn. And then while we're fixing the top of our library, we also have a card like Elven Chorus, which lets us cast creatures from the top of it and also turns all of our creatures into birds of paradise so we can cast yet more creatures. And then, while not really in keeping with the love and harmony of the elves, Skullclamp is just so good at drawing cards in any deck filled with 1/1s it has to be mentioned. Call it Galadriel's Dark Side or something like that. To synergize with all the counters the deck will be throwing around, a card like Inspiring Call will be fantastic at drawing us a bunch of cards, while also giving a large portion of our board some protection at instant speed as well. And then we have Elrond, Master of Healing. This puts a ton of counters onto our creatures with the reliable Scry of Galadriel, but then if an opponent ever tries to target them, we're rewarded with some lovely card advantage. Then lastly, we have Distant Melody, a fantastic card in any deck like this that's going to be putting a bunch of the same creature types into play. If things are going well, this will draw us an ungodly amount of cards. Next up is our ramp section, and this will be pretty hefty because there's just so many good options available to us. First up, we have some Mana Dorks. These are just some of the best cards in the deck, as early game they'll help ramp us ahead, and then later on each will trigger Galadriel. The fact that Arbor Elf, Elvish Mystic, Findhorned Elves, and Llanowar Elves are all just single green to cast means that we can also cast all of them off the triple green mana production of Galadriel as well. Next up you have some 2 Mana Dorks, with Bloom Tender, Incubation Druid, Paradise Druid, and to me the pick of the bunch, Priest of Titania. With these we firstly want them to be elves, then they either need to fix for all of our colours of mana, like Incubation Druid or Paradise Druid, or make us a bucket load of mana, like Bloom Tender or Priest of Titania. At 2 mana you also have Gala Greeters, which is basically a mini Galadriel. With everything the deck is doing, we'll easily be able to get all the motes out of it, but most importantly for our mana, we'll get that treasure every turn. At 3 mana, we also have some really fantastic options, with cards like Elvish Archdruid and Marwyn the Nurturer tapping for a massive amount of mana by themselves. And then you add to that Rishkar, which when combined with Galadriel, will make all of our creatures be able to tap for mana as well. You also then have Elvish Harbinger, a 3 mana dork that taps for any colour that we need, while also importantly tutoring for the best elf card we have in our deck and puts that elf on top of our library. If we then have Galadriel out, we can just draw it straight away, effectively turning the Elvish Harbinger into a demonic tutor. Then also at 3 mana, we have Farhaven Elf and Wood Elves. These are elves that come into play and then get a land straight out of the deck. These are really good for some extra bits of diversity in your ramp. And then we have some budget Gaia's Cradles with Circle of Dreams Druid and Growing Rites of Itlamok. Both are fantastic at making us all the mana in Middle-earth. Next up is our interaction section, and like with most decks we want to start with 8 bits and then go out from there the more competitive that our playgroup is. First up we have some Elven answers. You have Reclamation Sage, which is always a great bit of utility for answering an artifact or an enchantment. And then you have Windswift Slice, which is a great fight spell that can also make us a bunch of elves as well. You then have a plethora of instant speed answers to choose from. You either want them cheap and efficient like Path to Exile or Swords to Plowshares, or have some flexibility to answer anything with things like Beast Within, Generous Gift and Stroke of Midnight. Throw in a couple of board wipes with things like Supreme Verdict and Farewell, and you'll be good to go. Next up is a little bit of protection, and we have a ton of awesome cards that we can look at. First up we have some cheap counter magic with things like An Offer You Can't Refuse, Swan Song and Fierce Guardianship, which are all great at countering the board wipes and targeted removal coming our way. To help protect Galadriel specifically, we have Arwen Mortal Queen. We can put that indestructible counter onto Galadriel if something ever goes wrong, but the fact that we can blink Arwen to reset it as well is going to be fantastic. You then have Galadhrim Ambush, which is great at protecting our life total while also making us a massive army of elves as well. And then to protect the army, we have Galadriel's Dismissal and Heroic Intervention, which are just fantastic cards. And if we have any kind of board state, they're also basically win cons. Talking of win cons, let's go over some cool ways that we have to win the game. First up, we have Raise the Palisade. As most of our deck is elves, we can just use this to return any creature that isn't one to their owner's hands, basically meaning it'll be our elves left to attack through unblocked. To help buff up our elves even more, we have cards like Haldir, Lorien Lieutenant, and Jaraga Warcaller. These all buff up all of our elves equal to the number of counters on them, easily making our whole board big and scary. And then for some one-shot death, you have some Elven classics with Triumph of the Hordes, Azuri Renegade Leader, Craterhoof Behemoth, and Endrace Forerunners. These are just what you want when you really need to end a game of Magic. To help get the creatures of them out of the deck, you have Old Faithful in Natural Order. This is a really strong card, and fantastic if you're in a more spiky playgroup. For some more cool cards, we have Rally the Galadhrim. This can give us copies of some of those game-winning creatures, or just some awesome value creatures as well. Then lastly, you have effects like Panharmonicon, Roaming Throne, and Elishnorn Mother of Machines. These all double up any of the ETB effects that we have in the deck, and also importantly, Galadriel's abilities when we put another creature into play. Rounding off the deck with some utility lands, we're 3 colours so we can't run too many, but we do have some cool options here. For colourless lands, we first have Wirewood Lodge and Gavany Township. The Lodge untapping one of our busted mana makers will be really good in the deck. Then the Township is just a great mana sink to make our board all the bigger. For some green options, we have Oran Reef the Vastwood, again for some bonus counters, and then we have Castle Garenbrig, which is great at helping us cast all the creatures that we have in the deck. For blue, we have Rivendell for some extra card selection, and then in white, we have Minas Tirith, which all but guarantees we draw an extra card every turn.
Right, thank you all very much for watching. Do make sure you like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff helps grow the channel. And if there's any other commanders you would like me to take a look at, do a deck on, put them down in the comments and I'll check them out. But until next time, I'll see you all soon. Goodbye.